Hi everyone, welcome to today's Off the Page. We're just going to give it a few minutes for people to come in. Please make sure your mics are off. I think everyone should be muted. Drop us a comment in the chat as well. Please say hi. Let us know where you're dialing in from today. I hope everyone's been having a good day, or morning for Val and afternoon for us here. We will be tweeting about the event as well using hashtag off the page. So if you are on Twitter, please do join in on the conversation as well. You can see a few people coming in. Hi, Lizette from Mexico. Wow. We'll just give it a few minutes before we get started. Hi, Daniel from Brazil. Wow, it's morning for quite a few people and evening for some others. So please note that this is going to be a recorded event, so we will be sending around a recording as well after the event is over. So if you miss any key tips, don't worry. I can see some more people coming through. So today we're going to be discussing leadership and influencing in an uncertain world. So I think we can get started. So everyone, welcome to our Off the Page event, which is run by Kogan Page. And for those of you who don't know, Kogan Page are an independent publisher of business books and content. And Niamh and Val today will be discussing how to lead and influence in an uncertain world. Please note that the event is recorded, so we can share the recording with you after the event. As I said, we will be tweeting as well, so please do join in on the conversation using hashtag off the page, and do tag us and Val Wright. If you are on LinkedIn, then you can also connect with both of the authors. Don't forget you can save 25% off their books as well. Future Shaper and Rapid Growth Done Right both have just published in the last few months. So, and we'll put the discount code in the chat as well and the link to where to get it. So please post your questions in the chat as well. Do keep them coming. We're going to be answering a lot of them today. We are going to have a few minutes of discussion, and then we're going to be jumping straight into your questions. And thank you to those of you who also sent us your questions beforehand. Remember to keep your microphone muted so we can keep it running as smoothly as possible. So over to Niamh O'Keefe and Val Wright to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Janie. I'm Niamh O'Keefe. Delighted to be with you all. I have 25 years experience as a leadership advisor, and I'm on to, I think, my 5th book on leadership. And most recently, as Janie mentioned, I wrote about how leaders can take charge in an uncertain world. I suppose I just noticed a pattern that unpredictability was the new predictability. And it seemed that leaders were being overwhelmed in the face of all this change. And that was before COVID-19 kicked in. So that's me, and that's why I'm here today.
Hello, I'm Val. I'm a Brit living in Los Angeles. After spending 20 years in corporate life in Xbox, Microsoft, House of Fraser, BMW, I decided to launch my own innovation and leadership business, because what I enjoy most is helping leaders figure out how they can accelerate innovation, accelerate growth, and make the most of their resources around them. And so my books really focus on how to give someone a toolkit so that they can immediately apply practical advice. So I'm really looking forward to answering your questions. I've loved all of the insights, and I've loved seeing you all coming from around the world. And so you can ask live questions in the chat box, and we will get to as many of them as we can in the next 59 minutes.
Great. Well, let's kick off with our first question. So, what do leaders need to do today to reset their business and prepare for relaunch? Val, do you want to kick us off?
Of course, yeah. A great executive that I've been working with called Julie Bernard is the Chief Marketing Officer and Board Advisor of a number of different retail and digital companies. And she uses the phrase champions adjust. And I feature an interview of her in my new book. And the idea that you need to be able to adjust to be more successful is kind of obvious, but not always easy. And what I'm finding, I'm hearing a lot of leaders and entrepreneurs and small business owners say right now is, what was true yesterday is not necessarily true today, and I'm not quite sure what's going to happen tomorrow. And so the faster that you as a leader can adjust and figure out how do we change how we work with our customers? You know, I've got one of my favorite restaurants in Pasadena is called Union, and they're now a grocery store that does grocery deliveries as well as delivering their food. And so your ability to figure out what you know and what you don't know and be able to adjust will really be able to set you apart right now.
Yes, Val, I was thinking, you know, in a way, it's such a mega event that we've all been through. I mean, in fact, it's been, I would say that even the word relaunch is an underestimation of what we need to be thinking of. You know, when you think about it, we've either been through a near-death experience ourselves, or we've had to, you know, confront our mortality or the mortality of loved ones. And so I think in terms of businesses preparing for a relaunch, I think it understates what's happening. I think really, it's like a press the reset button. You know, it's actually the best way to prepare is actually to think of this not like a new normal, but a completely new beginning. And so everything is up for grabs. And I wonder if business leaders are going that far in the thinking of it. So it's not incremental, but it's a mega shift, a complete reset. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree, because what I am finding is leaders and companies are implementing projects that would typically take 3 years in 3 weeks. They're able to accelerate some of those kind of like crazy ideas they have in their sandbox, like what could we possibly do? And go, you know what? We could try this right now because we need revenue, or we've got to cut costs. And so the appetite for some of exactly what you're saying is, how do you completely reinvent? The appetite for that is so much bigger. And then what I'm also seeing is this, it's kind of like a nuance, because, you know, we just saw in the chat, and, you know, for those of you who just joined, please put the city in the chat of where you're calling in from, because it's great to see you all around the world. But what I'm seeing is, depending on where you live, depending what's happened to you personally in your family, as to, you know, whether you've been, you know, affected by this personally or tragically, you know, what's happened to you in your company, you know, are you furloughed? Are you laid off? Can you not open the doors of your business? Depending on where you are, which state you're in, it's so nuanced, your reaction to this. And whereas some people think, I'm never getting on a plane again, I'm never going into an office again until there's a vaccine. And then you get other people who are completely frustrated by the overreaction to what is happening right now. And so depending on all of that nuance, as a leader, what you have to do is figure out, where's your team? Where are you? Where's your team? Where's your business? What are your customers thinking? And then how do you adapt depending on, you know, how people are experiencing this? Because it is not one reaction for everyone.
Maybe there's a sort of an equation here, which is the bigger the impact that this experience had on your business and people, the bigger the journey you have to go on in terms of your reset and your new beginning. So for example, some of the tech companies that were already, you know, serving the online marketplace, already had remote workers, you know, you know, they were already in the future, you could say. The businesses that were more in real life and relied on in real life employee presenteeism, customer presenteeism in person, they're the ones that have had such, you know, have had such suffering or big impact. And I think maybe that's the, you know, that those that have suffered the most have the biggest journey to take, because I think there's no going back. I mean, I think that you could be as bold as to say that you don't go back to your workplace potentially. You figure out why, like, what is the business case for anyone ever going back into the office? Because remote working, if it was 80-20, it should go the other way around now, you know, in terms of remote working should be the new beginning. And so I think, you know, it's, when people talk about relaunch, it's sort of, I wonder if they fully understand the, you know, how much of a reset this really is.
Right.
And how, if you think, how models need to change.
Yeah. And I think if you think about it, some businesses will be in that reset mode for longer, you know, because we've got, you know, different people calling in from around the world, and there are other countries that are opening back up. And then what opening back up looks like could be part of that relaunch. And then there might be other, you know, parts of the world or countries or industries that are in that reset mode for a longer period of time, where customers can't walk through their doors, or the customers are impacted economically. So they need different ways of, you know, engaging or buying your products or services. So I think it's very true to think about how the reset happens, and also how quickly you can make decisions during that reset. Because, you know, I get people to think about the 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock decision test. And it's the idea that if you make a decision at 10 o'clock, you can implement it by 2 o'clock, can't you? Well, if you're in a big company, how long does that really take? And if you force yourself to say, well, if you sped up decisions, if you empowered people to come up with those ideas and then simply implement them, you are going to be able to reinvent. You're going to be able to adjust and decide what needs to be done for your business. You know, I have one leader I was working with, a CEO, and he was saying to me, Val, I've just got to write this PowerPoint, and I've got to, you know, write this justification ready for my board. And then, but I need my leadership team to do all these things. And I said to him, I said, let's call him Fred. I said, Fred, you've got one of these, and you've got one of these. So when you're on a video call with your friends, with your with your team, you just say, 1, 2, 3, here are the priorities. You got that? Got any questions? Go. And he's like, oh my goodness, you mean I don't have to do a PowerPoint? I'm like, no, like, explain it, see what questions you have. And so I think this is an opportunity for leaders to really think about, how do you communicate? How do you make decisions faster? Because you've got to experiment and try new things and then be able to adapt.
Great, well, thank you. And I think this kind of, our next question moves on quite nicely on the more practicalities. How are companies around the globe adapting to an uncertain future? And have you got any examples to share with us? Niamh, are you okay to take this one?
Yeah, I am okay to take it, but only insofar as I haven't seen anything impressive, to be honest with you. I think there's been a lot of scrabbling around, you know, which is completely understandable. I mean, we're still only coming out of shock, if you like, in terms of what happened. So there had to be an immediate response. And I think there's still a lot of immediacy in terms of the response, and really only an opportunity now to catch your breath and think, oh, suddenly now we're returning, whatever that might mean for us. And then, you know, we have to keep one eye on the future, whatever that might mean for us. So I can't point to a company where I say they're doing this well. I looked at some examples today to take some inspiration. And really, I just think it's probably just worth everybody realizing that, you know, you yourself can empower yourself to think about what this means for you and for your company. And it's probably better not to, you know, we have a tendency to look to others for the answers. I don't think anyone has the answer. So I think it's worth, you know, scanning and picking up what different companies are doing in different places. But I mean, fundamentally, in terms of what people need to be thinking about is, okay, everyone went online. So online marketplace is massive now. So are your products, services, and platforms online? And if they're not, you better get online. If you're overly reliant on an in-person, in real life business model, you need to completely shift that quickly. There's other things, which is now employers are being expected to sort of be healthcare monitors and providers. So, you know, what will that mean? The changing role of the employer in terms of how they prepare to go back. And of course, there's massive new opportunities. So I think, you know, structurally, I suppose it's helpful to think of what's my immediate response? How do I plan my return? But the build for the future will be all about what are the entrepreneurial opportunities? What's the journey the customer's been on, and what might that mean, you know, for us? And maybe the only way to do those three responses is to have you know, different leads on the three different responses, because they're very different dynamics. I don't know what you think about that, Val.
Yeah, I think some, I think those are good things to think about. And I think some examples that I'd hold up of companies around the world that are adapting well and doing this is companies like Canada Goose, who've adapted their factories to make masks and protection equipment for healthcare workers. And LMVH was able to turn a factory around, I think in like 8 days from when the French government said, hey, we need help making hand sanitizer. And then just yesterday, one of my clients here in Los Angeles, Belkin, who make the cables for all of your phones and adapters and kind of in-home technology, they've just pivoted their factory in Rhode Island to make ventilators. And I think Dyson did the same in the UK. So I think some of the questions that you can ask are, what can your company do for your community? What resources do you have that you could otherwise adapt and help others? You know, there's an event company here in LA that, you know, does all those big tents and marquees for all of those conferences that are now cancelled. Well, they've pivoted their business to set up emergency hospitals and wards for all of the hospitals in the area to help with, you know, the extra capacity they need.
I mean, I think they're all like really great examples, but under the immediacy, you know, under the sort of like crisis response immediacy. But in terms of like, it's a bit like companies, I think, are too linear. Like they're like, we're in immediacy, now we're in return, then later we'll think about the future. I just think, you know, the immediacy is still like necessary, needs to continue. The return has started. No one's quite, like everyone's sort of figuring that out because they've got to take into account government and how their employees feel. But the building for the future, I think companies need to think about, what have our customers just gone on, like this massive journey? Maybe what we're offering is no longer even relevant. You know, like that's a massive, big thought. And I think, you know, our companies thinking big enough.
Yeah,
you know?
and I would agree. And I think that what companies have to think about is, what are they learning about customer psyche and behavior right now that might change as we get a vaccine and as people feel more safe traveling and being able to travel or move around or, you know, do your day-to-day life and business. What things in that psyche might change, and what things might go back to how we felt before about, we feel comfortable staying in a hotel or getting on an airplane. And I also, the other part that companies are starting to look at now is, you know, Twitter have said that companies around the globe can work from home permanently. Dell just announced that this morning. Google announced that they're taking May 22nd as a day of, you know, a breathing day of no more Zoom or technology calls, and a recognition of the stress of working from home. But I think it really depends on how financially sound a company is, because I'm finding companies and executives and businesses are having to work with their banks and investors far more than they have ever had to before. And while, it's great to say companies who are cash rich, like Microsoft or Google or Amazon, can say, Microsoft has this, you can apply for 12 weeks paid leave in the US, and you can just take it, if you're having stress, or if you've got, like, you're trying to homeschool your kids or look after elderly relatives. Now, that's good for cash rich companies, but how does that help the smaller business? Like, what can smaller businesses do, to make the most of the resources that are available, and or get inspiration from some of these things and say, well, how could that apply to me? And I think thinking through some of those things and saying, okay, well, what's my reality for my company and my customers, and what could work for me?
Yeah, totally get it. And I think the two big things that stand out for me in terms of, like, the two kind of, like, major areas of paradigm shift and opportunity, if you like, are in the areas of the home as a refuge, and the second one, health as a priority. And I think they're the two mega trends coming out of this. I think, like, home, whether it's working from home, entertainment at home, feeling safe at home, like, that's the big area for innovation and product ideas and services, I think. And then in terms of health, whether that's, I think consumers have gone on this big reset journey in relation to what's important to them. So, for example, previously what they were spending their money on, they're now thinking, oh yeah, that was actually non-essential. Like, this sort of essential, non-essential has come into the lexicon, and so if it's not essential now, then it's premium, So it's a little bit like a lot of, I think, brand businesses relied on the sort of brand premium as their selling point. Whereas now I think if you were a premium brand, but you weren't essential, I wonder how you're going to fare going forward. And, to try and understand that journey that the customer has been on, and how do you tighten up, I think, what it is that you're offering and where. And if you're not in the business of home and you're not in the business of health, I'm just wondering, where are you,
Yeah, you raise an interesting point of truly understanding, like, how you'd segment where the growth areas are, where those kind of, like, nervous, successful but nervous about the future, and then what's being completely obliterated. And I think if you look across, a number of companies or industries, you can kind of, like, segment them in those three ways. And the more that executive teams can be thinking those things through and having those conversations and saying, okay, where can we, help our customers more, or what is it they need? What products and services can we give away so that we can then get greater value further down the line? If they can do that right now, you then help build that connection with your customers, so that when they do, their wallet does increase, that they can spend more money, that you are top of mind for them.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I think you've given me the perfect segue there into our next question, which I think we've already touched upon again, but maybe there are just a few more tips and techniques you'd like to share. What lessons have leaders learned that may change the world of work forever?
Yeah, the biggest one is companies are letting go of their real estate, like, right now. So companies are not renewing leases, they're backing out of leases, they are reducing their company footprint in office space, because they have finally realized that the barriers around working from home for many workers, not every worker, aren't actually there. They're all up here, they're not actually real. And the amount of conversations I've had with leaders saying to me, Val, finally, I can now let my team work remotely because, Mr. X or Miss Y, who used to say it couldn't be done, we've now been able to prove that it can be done. So corporate real estate is going to hugely be impacted. And the lesson of, I don't need to be physically present with you in order to do business, to sell, to connect with the team. So I think that's a key lesson. The other lesson that I don't think people have learned properly yet, but need to, is that not everything needs to be a Zoom meeting. And taking your calendar from 2 months ago and simply replacing every location from conference room A to Zoom dial-in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 does not work. You cannot have everybody always staring at a screen connecting. Like, you've got to reset how you make decisions. You've got to reset how you influence people and get things done. And so the lesson I wish people would learn really fast is you've got to allow that free time space on people's calendar to work. You do not need hour by hour back-to-back meetings. And there's a section in my new book called Perfecting the Perfect Meeting. And it's all about what you do before, during, and after a meeting to drive productivity. So that's, you know, a lesson I wish more people would learn faster. I could give 10 more, but I'll stop.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the big standout lesson is no one was ready. You know, no one was ready. Like, that is massive. And so I think, like, if we don't learn from that, then we won't be ready again, you know, for the next mega event is what I'm calling it. So I think like that organizations will have to put in a new function and introduce new planning processes around this concept of readiness. Because, you know, in futurism, there's these things around the 4 Ps, which is, you know, possibilities, probabilities, predictables, and wildcards. Now, this was actually not a wild card. This had been discussed. It was just thought like, it's too big, so we don't want to think about it, you know? So I think where a lot of leaders and businesses and governments go wrong is they're not willing to invest in possibilities or in predictables. And then when it happens, they like to call it a wild card, and then they sort of, you know, recover as best they can. So I'm wondering, I mean, if I was giving advice to a CEO right now, I think I would say, okay, so you need to appoint a chief of future readiness. You need to fire all of your risk management people or put them in under this new function, little head. And then I would question whether group strategy should also go in under there, because where were they in the thinking of the future? You know, so somewhere around strategy and risk got lost a massive, you know, event that has changed all our lives. So something structural needs to change in terms of this idea of readiness, because it fits with the trend I mentioned earlier in terms of why I wrote my book in the first place, which is unpredictability is the new predictability. You know, if you know, even if there's an election and you think like Brexit, you think it's going to go one way or the other, it's going to go the other, the one you didn't think, because that's the pattern now. Will we have a pandemic or not? Of course not. You would like to think, nope, guess what? We had it. So are we going to have a resurge or a new pandemic? Instead of saying, let's hope not, let's get ready for when that will occur. Or what are the other wild cards that we like to think won't happen? And let's like do a better job on scenario planning, what ifs, you know, contingency planning, you know, and you know, that's kind of the big lesson for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I think what you're uncovering is what went wrong and how do we mitigate it in the future. And unlike my 3 daughters who are aged 10, 10 and 12, I get no joy from saying, I told you so. But there are quite a few people who are saying, I told you so right now. And it happens, you know, whether it's global pandemic or whether it's, you know, I work with a lot of technology leaders, whether it's system failure, whether it's, you know, the security people saying, you know, I told you there was a vulnerability here and, you know, we were going to get hacked, or, you know, you didn't invest in my IT team, so of course the website's going to fall over because we're at capacity because everyone's shopping online right now. The I told you so approach doesn't work. But what you have to do is right now you've got to evaluate, are people listening to me? And, you know, when I do have an insight and when I do have that, you know, I'm calling and flagging a risk, are people hearing me, and am I able to influence? And I've been saying to a lot of leaders lately, if you thought your relationships with an individual or someone you were trying to influence was not the best before this all happened, it is not going to get better while you are, and I shake my screen because I do this a lot, like while we are working through these rectangles, it's not going to get better unless you take new approaches, unless you find new ways to influence, unless you find new ways to communicate. And so you've got to do all that through this kind of very flat dimension of technology, because in some parts of the world, we may be living this way for a number more months. That's not good English, but a lot more time. There you go.
Yeah.
I'll eventually get my words out.
Yeah, no, and I think like with the whatever the reset and the pattern of uncertainty, I think just brings to the fore the importance of resilience as just an undeniable critical core competence for all employees, certainly a key promotion criteria for managers and leaders. You know, I think that regardless of where people were in the hierarchy, it didn't necessarily stack up in terms of how people stepped up. I think individuals stepped up regardless of whether they had the title of leader or not. Some individuals took initiative and some surprisingly didn't. And so it's almost like there was no correlation necessarily between the leadership hierarchy and the resilience hierarchy. And so I think that going forward, that's a critical competence that leaders and businesses need to think about in relation to recruitment, learning and development, you know, and promotions. And I just, you know, I guess it's stating the obvious, but it's been mentioned, but I think, you know, it needs to be at the forefront in relation to leadership competency going forward.
Wow, I think there's been some great points there, and you're both a little bit ahead of me in my questions. So this is the last one from me, and then we'll open up the Q&A. So please do start putting your questions in the chat. So and I know we've touched upon this already as well, but I think with a little bit of a shift of focus, when we're thinking about going back to business as usual, so I know, Val, you said that might be months away, but I know a lot of companies are already starting to think about that and how to phase back into work. So how can leaders best manage the change from lockdown to business as usual? And will usual ever happen again? Will it ever be usual again?
Okay,
Yeah.
so, oh yeah, sorry. You go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I was going to say, yeah, so it's not business as usual. And I think that's a false illusion. I think it's new business. You know, I think the word new normal is getting tired, so we should almost like not use new normal either. I just think new beginning, you know. So I think I said this earlier, you know, and I like backed up by what Val just said there in terms of companies announcing permanent remote working. I think permanent remote working should be in the new beginning, and unless there's a really exceptional reason why, then people physically go back, you know. So that's, I think the leaders, you know, who really understand what has actually happened here are those that will, you know, emerge the best from all of this, you know. They really get it, you know. We are now, you know, we were like the high street stores, for example. I just couldn't understand. I can't understand, like pre-COVID, every time a high street store was surprised that it, you know, went bust. I mean, come on, this has been going on for years. So like now, let's get it, right? We're all online now, unless there's an exceptional reason not to be. And I think what's interesting about that is it may burgeon new innovation and new entrepreneurial products and services for the in real life world. You know, there may be a premium to meeting in person, you know, like maybe, you know, Val and myself will charge more if you see us in person than online. You know, it's kind of like funny, but it's going to flip the other direction, I think. You know, if you're going to go to a restaurant, maybe it's going to cost much more now because they're taking a risk by having you in person, and they're having to have employees present. So you're going to have to pay twice now, you know? So I think, you know, like we can't, there's not anything, you know, there's almost like a fundamental re-examination of what it takes to not go back, but to start again. I almost think people need to think, I've arrived in this planet today. This is how it is now. Now, what does my business need to do? You know, I don't know. That might sound dramatic, but I feel like it's that dramatic.
Yeah, what I think is interesting that you have to ask yourself whenever you're leading through changes is there's two questions to ask. Do people understand? And do people believe? Because if people don't understand, they can't believe what you're suggesting is going to happen. They can't believe the changes are going to work. And so first you have to fully help people understand. And then you have to help people believe that the decisions you're making or the direction that your company is making is exactly what will help you become successful. And so getting that understanding and getting that belief is a key role of you as a leader. And, you know, I always seek inspiration from music and art. You know, I'm a huge David Guetta fan. I don't know how many saw his concert that he did in Miami, and there were all these tall condo blocks of flats all around him, and he was at the bottom of the swimming pool, and everyone was on their balconies, socially distancing, dancing and partying, and he raised $1 million during a 2-hour set because he was fundraising for the Red Cross. David Guetta is featured in my book because I seek inspiration from music. So think about, as you're communicating and as you're trying to lead through this change, where do you get inspiration from? Music, art. I love Banksy. I don't know how many of you saw this from Banksy. This is him saying, my wife hates it when I work from home and the rats have taken over the bathroom. I can relate. There's 5 of us in our house at any one time, all fighting for internet bandwidth. And then he posted this one on his Instagram account today, which is showing who the new superheroes are. You know, the kid has put all of his Batman and Spider-Man hero toys in the trash, and look at who the heroes are. So what can you be doing in your company to help connect with the very frontline workers who are keeping us safe as well? And so those are some of the things that I challenge around how you're leading through change. You know, how do you bring music, art, props, ideas into this like very flat way that we're communicating right now, because people are getting tired of being on Zoom calls. So I appreciate the hundreds of you who have signed up to join us today and listen to us, because, you know, there's a lot of fatigue happening.
And do you think, I mean, what I noticed from the Banksy drawing there, or, you know, and I've seen it already, but is that, you know, so our superheroes are the frontline workers. They're not our leaders, you know, so I'm annoyed with our leaders. You know, what are they doing? You know, it's frustrating. It's a word, it's overused, it's misunderstood. It's like, alongside of our rebirth, I think there needs to be a fresh provocation around our leaders, who they are really. Just because you have the title doesn't mean you did anything. You know, what matters in the future? What do we want from them? You know, I just think I would just encourage everybody to take this opportunity to rebirth themselves, if I may put it like that, as a leader, and decide themselves, you know, decide themselves what, you know, what they saw was great leadership, what they think, you know, they can do to empower themselves in their companies. And don't look to the traditional leaders, you know, who may not have served you well in this time, you know. Rebel, I say. I'm looking for a revolution here, a leadership revolution.
Well, on that note, well, we can start taking some questions. Maybe some people will join you in your revolution. So our first question in the chat is from Paul, and he's asking, are employees safer than contractors in the new world of work?
Are employees safer? I don't know. I mean, I don't know about, but like, this just, I mean, it's just, I guess it shows health and safety. It's going to have a completely new definition as to what that means, but I think it's going to come down to individual responsibility, you know, because the employee can be virtual or present, your contractors, same. So, but I just think it more so the question shines a light on what's on people's minds now, you know, it's either on home or it's on health.
I think he's just clarifying in the chat, he means job security.
Ah, sorry. I'm very literal sometimes. In job security.
So I would say from a global perspective, it really just depends. And I don't think that it significantly matters who is paying you and what that level of contract is. What's more important is, are you adding value? And if the value you were adding cannot currently be fulfilled, how are you pivoting and doing something different? So, for example, dental practices right now in the US used to be constrained by really tight health laws about what they were and were not allowed to do through telehealth, through technology. And all of those legislation has been relaxed. And so what they've done is they've pivoted their reception staff and their administrators to now be doing some basic fundamental diagnosis of, you know, how serious is your condition, and doing some kind of like, you know, taking very clear questions and doing some preliminary evaluations. Now that adaptability couldn't happen before because of law. It didn't matter whether they were contractors or permanent. They've been pivoting the demand because there's a huge demand that no one wants to walk into their dental office right now. And so the question is more, how valued are you? How can you change that value if what you were doing has gone away? And, you know, sitting in Los Angeles, you know, the entertainment capital of the world, you know, there's no movies being filmed. There's no studios currently in operation, and, you know, lots of the retail is closed down. And so there's a lot of people pivoting, but there's a lot of people that are telling me they are making a ton of money doing very innovative things, supporting people in their home. You know, Postmates and Grubhub are two kind of delivery services that people are being tipped like nowhere before. And I know the tip culture is different in each country. But in terms of safer, as in job protection, I think it really depends what country you're in. But I just think about what value you provide and how can you adapt that.
I totally agree with that, Val. Like, I think, you know, your value proposition, you know, is the only thing you've got, and that has to you have to keep investing yourself in your own value proposition, whether you need to upskill, you need to pivot, like Val was saying, you need to join a different company, different industry. If you see the signs that your offering or your business is now no longer relevant, then it's up to you, you know, to either influence the change within or to think about moving elsewhere. So I think your job security won't come from outside of you. It'll come from what you're doing to enhance your value proposition in this new world.
Great. Well, our next question comes from Adrian Cudby, who is a known name to us at Kogan Page. So welcome, Adrian. So he said, you mentioned home and health as priorities. Where do you think professional education sits, i.e. once you're in work?
Okay, so because I'm so literal, and let me explain the question some more.
So I think, Adrian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is kind of workplace learning a little bit more, and where will education sit sort of once we're back into the workplace?
So for me, everything now sits online, unless you can tell me a very exceptional reason why it isn't online. You know, so I think we have to like really now get this. Everything is online, unless for some reason it isn't, not the other way around. So professional development is now online, unless there's some really good reason why it isn't. And it can't be online in a boring way. It has to be online in a better way, in a more engaging way. Say, for example, with remote workers, we had the concept of remote working. We had virtual employees. but that model didn't really stack up, you know, because people weren't supported with proper motivation and engagement strategies. So even though we might have had the beginnings of online, virtual, remote before, they didn't fully stack up. So now we're 100% in it, unless for some reason we need to be out of it, and it needs to be better. What do you think, Val?
I think there's a nuance there around pre-vaccine and post-vaccine. So everything you said, I completely agree until there's a vaccine. And when there's a vaccine and people feel safe, everybody I talk to is craving getting outside of this. Some people have done it, some people are able to do it. Everyone is craving a connection, you know, a real life family dinner table with more than just the people you've been locked down with. Everyone is craving seeing their co-workers and having that casual interaction. So I see that people are questioning more, why on earth would I go to that conference? And so there's, if you take the, let's assume that there is a, you know, people have that physical safety, that they feel okay traveling and feel okay attending a conference. I see people valuing that in-person connection way more because
Definitely.
It's been taken away. And, you know, just like when you, when you cut out sugar for you know, some health kick, and then you eat your first cake, like it tastes delicious.
But I think,
you know,
what it will be is that the in real life is definitely, we understand now it's more special, but that will come with a premium. And then also, so it's almost like, you know, we crave it, so we appreciate it more. So it's a premium experience now in real life. And we need to, you know, there will be an industry in real life for sure. There will be happenings and events in real life for sure. But even when there's a vaccine, you know, there will be another interruption. There'll be another pandemic. There'll be another version. So we can't be exposed again. So even if your business has an online and an in real life presence, it needs to be calibrated such that it can go online again, or that online will support it. Or you create a model where my business is in the special experience in person business, and there's such a huge risk attached to that I'm going to make that really expensive. You know, I mean, of course I'm saying this like as if I'm stating something, but I'm more trying to work it out myself as well. But I just think people will have to make that switch, you know, and then maybe they can pare back, you know, from that. But it's almost as if, like, flip it, like we're in the online world, and then how do we then come back out of it in you know, in exceptional circumstances? Oh, what might that mean? And I suppose it comes down to, again, our company's going to rework through some of those models, think of those scenarios, or whether they're just going to be like a high street, which goes on and on and on, a high street shop, you know, denying the reality, and then eventually, suddenly, inverted commas, going bust, you know? So I think that's what I think people need to really shift, you know?
Janie, I think you have a few more questions there for us, right?
Yes, we do. So the next one is from Gaitan, who has been at a few of our events, so welcome back. And he's asking, from a HR perspective, is the world of work being gradually driven towards a dehumanization process, hence impacting upon and altering leadership models?
When I hear the word dehumanization, I think robots. And everybody has hated robots for a really long time. And having worked at Amazon, you know, when we acquired Kiva, which was the warehousing that like moves the shelves to the people rather than the people having to walk to the shelves, I'm fascinated by this idea of what dehumanization of the workplace means. And what I have seen is that people have embraced with open arms the idea of how can we use more technology so that we can help our employees be safer and more productive. And so it will absolutely be different. And the biggest piece of the leadership model that I think will become a higher priority is your ability to manage remotely, and your ability to adapt and lead through change.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like, I think just as events go by, then leadership has to evolve. And I think that, you know, like, yes, if there's any dehumanization or AI or increased technology processes taking place, then you have to think about what you're left with that only the leader can do, you know, and that they are things like care and creativity, you know. So the caring aspect of the leadership in terms of emotional intelligence or inspiring people or setting the vision in terms of what the machines need to do, you know, that becomes important. And the creativity in terms of, well, what should be happening here anyway. So I suppose my response is, like, leadership is always changing, and you know, it's a bit like the evolution of a species. Leadership is part of that. It needs to evolve constantly.
Great. So we've got another question from Christine. How do you think it is best to manage the mental health of employees in a virtual world?
I love we are having this conversation. I love that people are asking about mental health. And I know there have been a lot of initiatives in different companies and countries to raise awareness, but I love that this conversation is highlighted even more now, because the biggest thing that you can do as individuals is be okay with not being okay. And having conversations with your team about how hard this is, or how realistic your expectations are of what you need from them, and asking them how you can help them. And asking how, you know, one of my favorite movies of all time is Inside Out by Pixar. And it's about this girl who has these voices in her head that control her emotions, and there's anger, and there's disgust, and there's joy, and there's sadness. And the movie idea is all about, I'll post an article I wrote for Inc. magazine on my Twitter straight after this, so you can go read it. And it's all about how it's okay to be sad, and how sometimes you have to let anger run the show. And the more you can talk about your emotions as an individual and help tap into your team, the more helpful it will be. If you're responsible for programs in your company that provide support for this, absolutely make sure people know what is available. I could talk for this for hours, but I know we only have 13 minutes left, so I will be quiet.
Yeah, I think providing a menu of options and then letting people choose what they want and when they want it is probably the best way forward. I think there came a point, almost a crescendo, of care packaging or care provision during, you know, sort of about 4 weeks into lockdown. I think HR sort of went into overdrive in some companies on providing care packages, like almost mandatory to the point of distraction. And I think that was just an overreaction. So that's okay. It went from kind of zero to all of this, and now it just needs to rebalance. And I think the best way to provide, like specifically to manage the mental health of employees, is to have services, yes, and then let people access them as and when. And then I think as well, don't nanny state it, like, as in, don't be the nanny to everyone, like, you know, don't infantilize people in the sense of, you don't have to take responsibility for everybody's health. Each person, you can provide the services, and then each person can access as and when, if or not at all. But definitely agree, it's great that it's all opened up, for sure.
And then we've got one more, I think we have time from in the chat, from Dipanki. How can one make a difference in this competitive world?
I would say it's going back to how you add unique value to your employees, to your company, but more importantly, your community. And if you can answer that for yourself, then you'll make a difference.
I think, Deepanki, if you can think about like what matters to you, and if you can create a business out of that, you know, in terms of like, what's your vision for that? How can you engage other people in that? And how can you, you know, create a legacy from that? Then I think that's the way forward in terms of making a difference. Because once you understand your purpose and your vision, then some of the competition falls away because they're just, you know, trying to make money as opposed to trying to really make a difference. So I think one way to stand, you know, to stand out is to really think about what matters to you and put all your energy behind that. And then it will be impossible almost to knock you, because no matter what happens, you're focused on your mission, whatever it is that matters to you in terms of making a difference. And I think that will have longevity in the longer run versus short-termist competition.
Thank you. And then I was just thinking that we can close off with a question that we had from before the event that came through when people were signing up. And it's around, you know, leaders are having to make some tough choices at the moment. There's been a lot of hard decisions that have had to be made. So how can leaders be kinder to themselves when making these tough choices? And what should they be doing to think about their own well-being? Val, do you want to kick that one off?
Sure. I like to ask, who do you call? Like, if you needed to call someone now or text them, who is on your speed dial? Who will answer within 15 minutes? Like, what is your own kind of support mechanism like for advice? And if you can't tell me in your head 4 names right now, then think about who could become in your inner circle. Because what I find with really successful leaders is they rise at a rate that often outpaces their peers. And so without you realizing it, all of a sudden you are the most successful person around you, which is great and nice, but you need to be able to upgrade who are the people that you are hanging out with so that you have peers who are going through what you're going through. So I have CEOs who can talk to other CEOs. I have chief financial officers who talk to other chief financial officers. So one of the best ways that you are kind to yourself is you have people around you who you can call, who can give you advice and give you support. The other piece is really taking time to be what I call sensibly selfish. And it's, you know, I've got 3 battery packs on my desk right here, making sure my devices and my phones are going to stay charged. But if I was to ask all of you at, you know, this hour, you know, what percentage of your battery pack charge are you? Are you at 100% fully charged, or are you at 50%? Or are you at 20% low battery mode because you had to get up early for this call, or, you know, your kids were driving you crazy last night, or you were at the hospital taking care of someone? Yeah, where's your battery level? And so think about your energy level as preciously as you think about your device's energy levels, and consider how you keep that charged.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, there's, you know, on the one hand, I would say, like, the best way to be kind to yourself is to think about what your kindest best friend would say to you, and then say that to yourself. But I don't know, I must be very grumpy today or something, but I'm just like in the tough love mode, right? Which is, you know, I would say if you have the position of leader, I mean, yes, you need to be well supported yourself, but you need to be thinking about other people. You know, you have to have empathy for yourself, but I think it starts with the empathy for the other people too. And I think, you know, don't take it for granted. Like, first of all, I would question, I just feel like, you know, who's calling themselves a leaders nowadays? I don't know. Like, first of all, am I a leader? Question mark. Before I even think about, you know, how can I be kind to myself as a leader? What have I done to lead during this crisis? What am I doing to lead in terms of the return or the renew? What am I doing to lead in the future? Like, it's starting to annoy me, all this talk about leadership. It's so funny. I'm a leadership advisor, but it's kind of like, you know, be kind to yourself. Maybe you're not a leader, you know, but, you know, assuming you are a leader really, and you genuinely believe you are one, then yes, have as much empathy for yourself as you have for other people. But really question, you know, have you been a leader during this period of time? You know, is there more you can do to, you know, to help other people? And then, and of course, being a leadership advisor, hire a leadership advisor. I'd have to say that.
Well, thank you both so much for your time today. And I think we've had some really interesting opinions. So it's been a great discussion. Thank you both so much. Just for some people that might be interested, we've got some upcoming events as well. Tomorrow we have a talk on how to communicate in a crisis. And then next week we will be looking at producing engaging and relevant content during lockdown. And just a reminder that you can save 25% on both Niamh's and Val's books, which are available on our website, and I will put the link again in the chat. So thank you everyone so much for your time today, and we hope you have a great evening or day wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Janie.